And welcome back to my channel. My name is Michelle, aka the Ignited Teacher, and what I do on this channel is I provide math teachers like yourself with evidence-based strategies that can be used in your classroom as early as the next day. So if you're a new teacher or even an experienced teacher, routines and procedures can derail your entire school year. But before I dive into giving you examples of routines and procedures, there's a difference between the routine and the procedure. Routines are things that you do daily. That is your daily schedule. For example, if you're an elementary teacher, you come in the morning, you might have morning meeting, then go to the restroom. And then after the restroom, you might have small group instruction. For middle and high school, you have your 3 or 4 periods, sometimes 5, 6, and 7 periods a day, maybe 8. And those periods have different routines and procedures, especially if you have a class that is after lunch. That routine and what you do in your classrooms may be different than the routine for the class at the beginning of the day. So keep in mind, routines are what you do. Now, moving on to procedures. Procedures are how you do it. For example, if you're coming in the morning and you're elementary teacher, especially K through 2, and your students have to sit on the carpet, how do you want your students to come to the carpet? That is something that has to be planned out, especially with your little kinder, first, and second graders, because sometimes they don't always get the instructions right. So you have to model that and teach them how to come to the carpet for this routine. For example, with restroom, how do you want your littles to line up for the restroom? That may be different from your routine in a third, fourth, and fifth grade classroom because those students have already been in school for a number of years. Also, switching classes if you are in upper elementary. How do you want your students to line up in the hallway? How do you want them to pack up to get ready to dismiss? These are all procedures that must be planned and executed and revisited over and over again during the school year. Because if you do not revisit these and reinforce and consistently reinforce them, your students will take over your classroom. I had a teacher that, or principal, that told me your students' uptime is when you're trying to have some downtime. And you have to always keep your procedures and how things are done in your classroom at the forefront, especially after a break, after a long holiday, Christmas holiday. You're going to have to go through your routines and procedures when those students come back. And that's something that a lot of younger teachers and even experienced teachers can forget, that those students, how they do things at home is not how they do things in your classroom. So I'm going to tell you a little story about what happened to me as a first year teacher. And every time I tell this story, people do not believe it. So I was teaching first grade. It was my very, very first year. And I had a student who, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that he was a child that would leave the campus. Now, I'm teaching first grade. I had a 5-year-old at the time. My son was 5 years old. So I never in a million years thought a first grader would leave the campus. Well, I sent the student by himself to the restroom. We didn't have any rule against sending the kids to the restroom by themselves. And that student, and I guess time got away from me, and that student left the campus. and had a stranger in the neighborhood bring him back to the campus. So the principal brings the child back to my room, and luckily for me, nothing happened to the child. And his mom comes to the school and says, well, he's done that before. That was my saving grace because it was something that the parent had not disclosed to me. But after that incident happened, a procedure was put in place. How did the students go to the restroom? They had to go on a buddy system to keep that from happening again. So the routine was fine, go to the restroom, but how we had to carry out the routine had to change because we had some little people that would leave the campus. And that leads me to my next topic. It's about just adjusting your routines. Adjusting your routines is okay. You're not going to have the same routine for every class. You're just not. Some of those kids are going to do exactly what they want to do, and other classes have their own personality. For example, when I taught middle school, first period was always quiet. That lunch period, coming back after lunch, oh my God. So I had a totally different routine for my lunch crowd people because they were so wired up. And that's the same thing with you. If you have multiple classrooms, they're going to have their different personalities depending on who's in that class. Like I said, first and second period was great. That third and fourth period, that was a lot. And even with elementary, when I taught elementary, I started out self contained and I taught all the subjects. So even with that, at the beginning of the day, a lot of my little kids were sleepy. They would come in sleepy because God knows what happened last night. They didn't get enough sleep. It was just all kinds of things that were going on. And some kids would come in hungry. So the beginning of the day sometimes can be rough. And as the day moves on, things get a little bit more smoother, especially if you're in a self contained classroom teaching all of the subjects. It can be a little rocky for some children at the end of the day. So remember, it is okay to adjust those routines and procedures for your students if the classroom needs it. Classroom management is about keeping your class organized and orderly. If you can keep that at the forefront of your mind, organized and orderly, you will make sure that you are on top of those routines and procedures. And I'm going to be honest with you, we're human. Sometimes you're not going to feel like doing it. And I'm going to tell you that is a mistake. And take it from me, it is a mistake. I've done it before because some days I'm tired and I don't feel like having them execute the procedure the way that it's supposed to be. But if you continuously do that, it will derail your entire classroom management plan. Here are some examples of routines and procedures. Come entering the classroom. That's a routine. It should have a procedure that goes with it. Sharpening pencils. I'm be honest with you. You ain't sharpen pencils in my classroom. It drove me bananas. So there, no, you can't sharpen pencils. I would sharpen pencils at one point in the day, maybe twice in a day, but you cannot sharpen pencils in my classroom. So there was no procedure. There was no routine because we didn't sharpen pencils. Also, going to the restroom, asking questions, all of those are examples of routines that need procedures. But the most important routine is dismissal. Any and everything can happen at dismissal. And when I say dismissal, that could be dismissal for lunch, dismissal to go to your specials, dismissal to switch classrooms, dismissals to go home. Anytime there's a major transition, you will be at risk of anything and everything happening. And also, this is a high time for fights. Transitionings are a time where you have to have tight procedures in your classroom, because if you don't, it will get the best of you and you'll find yourself being called in and asking why this happened in your classroom. And it have I gotten called in? No, but have I gotten questioned? Absolutely. But you have to have routines and procedures. And it's up to the kids to follow them, and you hold them accountable for those routines and procedures in your classroom. To help you with planning for your routines and procedures so that you can have a great beginning of the school year and an excellent end to your school year, I have a free checklist that will help you with those most basic routines and procedures for your classroom. This checklist is an easy peasy checklist for you to complete as you're thinking about your transitions in your classroom. For example, the first one is when you enter the room. That is going to be super, super important because it sets the tone for your classroom. The next one is passing out materials and supplies, transition to restroom, lunch, small group, etc. And I'm going to do another video on small group classroom management ideas. Distributing and picking up homework, if you're giving it out or if it's on paper and pencil, your behavior management plan, and the end of the day dismissal. Now, you can add to this checklist because this is just general ideas to help you get started with some routines and procedures that are common in most classrooms. So, to recap, the 3 ideas from this video is definitely plan your routines and procedures for your classroom. This is not something that you want to take lightly if you're planning on having a successful school year. Remember, classroom management is about keeping your classroom organized and orderly. Secondly, you can also adjust your routines and procedures for certain classrooms that may need it. There may be that rambunctious class after lunch or before dismissal where you need to do things differently in that classroom based on the personality and the students that are in the classroom. And lastly, be consistent. It is human nature to say, I am tired, and today I don't feel like not allowing them to sharpen pencils, and then you allow them to sharpen pencils or to go to the restroom without a pass. Those are things that will derail your whole classroom management plan because guess what? Guess who's watching? Your students and your administration. So make sure that even on your worst day that you keep those routines and procedures consistent, and hopefully this will mitigate many, many issues in your classroom. Don't forget to subscribe if you like this content on my channel, and hit the bell notification to get notified when I upload new content.